All right, last week we talked about food chains. Now we're going to continue that lesson and move on to a little bit harder of a concept called food webs. I'm just kind of pulling out some samples of food chains from last week. Okay, so this should be a review. We're going to continue with food chains, then go into food webs. So notice a food chain starts in one place and ends in another. Similar to a chain maybe you wear, it continues in a nice straight line and you follow those arrows exactly like a chain does in real life. So, this is something really important to remember about a food chain. Remember, we start with that sun, gives energy to a producer. Producers make their own food, everybody, through photosynthesis. A consumer can either be an herbivore, carnivore, or an omnivore, and they consume that producer. The first consumer is the first consumer, and then so on. It goes on to a secondary consumer, which means the second consumer that ate another animal or ate another consumer. So it's something really important to remember. Now, food webs are complicated looking, but lots of times I noticed in the past kids really like food webs better than food chains. It's just a matter of really following those arrows. So, the definition of a food web is when we combine multiple food chains. Multiple means more than one. So, when we look at some, you'll see a variety of food chains within one food web. So a food web looks exactly how it sounds like. Think about a spider web. Lots of interaction among different animals in one habitat. Now, a food web shows the feeding relationship of all those organisms that live in that particular environment. So you got to think about what animals you would see in Sheffield Lake. Kind of think about various food chains you'd see, and you would combine it to show the relationship among all of them. And that's what a food web does. So it's when you combine all these food chains and it makes up a food web. Okay. So remember, sunlight gives energy to those producers. In a food web, if we add primary consumers, which is a synonym for the first consumer, these animals are the first consumers found in every food chain. So in this example, the sun's giving energy to, that plant, but then these animals that the arrows are pointing to, your deer, the mouse on the bottom, the fish, they're your first consumers. What makes them the first consumer is they're eating a producer. Then that makes them the primary consumer. And that grasshopper is eating the grass, so the grasshopper is the primary consumer in that particular food chain. So if we start showing how each food chain interacts with each other, you'll see how these animals are all interacting. So if you follow those arrows, so if we start with the sun giving energy to the tree, who eats the tree? The deer. Okay, but the deer can also get some energy from that grass because deers are herbivores, so they're eating grass as well. So if you show and kind of follow the arrows, it'll show you that that singular food chain within a food web. So a secondary consumer means second. These animals are the second consumers in each food chain. That doesn't mean they're the second one in the food chain because it goes the sun, then the producer, then a consumer. So secondary consumer just means it's the second one consuming. So in these examples, we go back to the deer. The deer's eating either the grass or the tree. Who eats the deer in this habitat? That's a wolf. So you follow that food chain: sun, tree, deer, wolf. Okay. You can probably spot a couple other food chains within